All right, well, go ahead and get started then. We're excited for tonight's webinar. Everybody, thank you for being on. The topic tonight is benefits of forming a business with anonymity, a super, super important topic. It honestly is a big part of asset protection. It really is, I think, a big part of the game when it comes to protecting your assets. Clint just mentioned that, you know, if they can't find out who owns the asset, well, then how can they sue it? So a big part of that game, and you know, you have charging order and different protections as part of your entities when you form them. But if they can't find out, even better. So maybe a 1-2 punch, and I'm sure Clint will go into some of that tonight. Kind of excited about it. So Clint, seriously, we always appreciate you. Thank you for being on tonight.
Great.
We appreciate it. But just a few more webinars coming up. If you are on the call and you miss it, or you have to leave early, we do put them on our YouTube channel now, and they're only on there generally for about 30 days. So we do take them off. So make sure and watch them. Just depends on, you know, when I get around to them, our staff gets around to loading them. Usually next day you should get the recording, and then sometimes within 30 days they're pulled off. So just watch that. YouTube.com, Protect Wealth Academy. Kind of awesome there. Go ahead and hit subscribe. If you want to see new videos that come out, hit subscribe so you don't miss them. We'd love to have them on there. And coming up, guys, like we were mentioning before, we have a live 3-day asset protection workshop coming up in Orlando, September 13th, 14th, and 15th. That is in Orlando at the Omni Champions Gate Hotel. Now, this is a beautiful hotel right on a golf course, lazy river. I mean, it's really fun. So I am bringing the kids to that too. It's going to be a blast. But if you want to stay at the hotel, our room block is actually, we've already exceeded our block. And they say they'll keep it open for us till next Monday, August 16th. So if you haven't booked your room, do it now. They say they'll keep it open until August 16th or until they're full. And apparently they are pretty busy right now in Orlando. So if you haven't done it, I'd book it fast because they are not going to guarantee us rooms much longer. So do it soon. Love to have you. Our agenda is pretty robust. We love it. The course is content loaded: asset protection, tax reduction, estate planning. Clint will be on there. It's a great workshop with the experts, Clint, Scott Estol, Don Pendleton. Love the workshop. Honestly, we've been doing this, gosh, since 1999, believe it or not. It's a great workshop, and love to have you there if you can make it. Of course, we don't want to give legal specific tax advice, so always do our disclaimer on here. If you're looking for that, look for a competent professional that will work for you. Happy to help you with that if you need it. Clint, thank you so much. Honestly, you're always one of the most popular presenters we have on here. It's a great topic by a great guy, and we're excited to have you on here. Really, thanks for doing it, Clint. We really do appreciate you.
You bet. I'm glad to be here. Am I ready to take over?
I think so. Go ahead and you should be good to share screen. Try it and let me know if you have any problems there. And if not, I should make sure.
Takes a few seconds. Here we go. Yes.
There we go. Okay. Yep. And then if you want to do Q&A throughout, and let me know. I'm happy to jump on. I'll be in the background here.
Okay. Great.
Thanks,
welcome, everyone. As Kellen said, you probably know who I am. I speak at the events that they put on, the tax and asset protection events. I've been working with Don and Kendall for probably, 18 years. And they asked me to put together an event or a presentation tonight regarding a topic that I thought was important that people would want to learn about. And it's something that many people don't quite understand how it works. And I wanted to start off with something out of the news. This came up several months ago. I cut a YouTube video on it, got a lot of hits on it, a lot of questions about this topic. And it really epitomizes how important anonymity is in planning. And if you didn't catch the story, this individual right here, her name is Patrice Coolers. She is with the Black Lives Matter. I think maybe she's no longer with them because of this. But anyways, what broke this story is that she ended up spending, $1 and something on a piece of property in California, Topanga Canyon, California. And the author for this piece in the New York Post, it was a hit piece, went out there, said, hey, how's this person who runs this charity, if you call it that, is out there and making this type of money where she's able to buy up million-dollar pieces of property. And there's some other property she bought as well. Now, when I heard about it, first thing comes to mind is, how the hell did the guy figure that out, right? You know, did she buy it in her own name? And so one of the things that you'd want to do is start searching through the county records to see if how he came about to find this information. Well, she didn't buy it in her own name. And in fact, what I did then, since I couldn't find anything about her listed as owning property, I went and I did a search in the state of California to see whether or not she had set up any entities, because then my next assumption was that she bought it through an LLC. And sure enough, this is where I got the hit. By typing in her name, it shows here that she created this Abolitionist Entertainment Limited Liability Company with an address right here for the initial mailing address at this address in California in Hawthorne Street. She's the agent for service of process. So again, she's making the simple mistakes that a lot of people make when they're trying to set up their own limited liability company, is that they're listing themselves in these positions. Not only was she listed as a registered agent, she's also the member of this limited liability company. She didn't actually complete this though, because down here it states the organizer is some guy named Sam. So these are three typical areas of which I can find out if somebody has set up a company and trace it back to them. I'll look at the registered agent, which I did here. I will look at the organizer. So if you set up your own LLC, the state will ask who organized this company, who's sending us this paperwork. And if you're sending the paperwork in, your name's going to be listed there. So that's how I can discover that you have a limited liability company. Well, in this case, she didn't do it herself, but she had someone do it for it and list her information on this entity. Now then, after I saw that, I looked at that address and I thought, interesting. So maybe this address is her personal residence. And so this took me as an aside when I ran a Google search on that address. It turns out this is not her personal address. It's actually this UPS store. It's a mailbox in a UPS store. And for those of you that are not familiar with setting up entities, you can use a mailbox like this, a post office box, for your business address, but you can't use it for your registered agent address. That is prohibited under law. So not only did she set up an LLC and disclose all of her personal information and tie herself to it, she also made a mistake in using this UPS store's mailbox as a registered agent's address. And how would this come up? Well, if she gets served with a lawsuit or somebody attempts to serve her, it's going to blow up in her face. And they'll probably say that they don't have to serve the entity because she's not using a proper registered agent's address. So she's created some problems for herself there, but that's an aside. The key here is that I know that this person is attached to this entity. So once I've discovered that, and I assume this is what this reporter did, I then logged into a service that I use called Statutory. And this service allows me to search the entire United States, and I can put in a person's information. I can see whether or not they're associated with real estate. And this is how I initially did my search. I went in and I typed her name into Statutory, and I found some property in her name, but not the property in question. It wasn't until I found that limited liability company name. And once I found that LLC, well, it brought me to this property detail report. And so I assume this is exactly what that reporter did. Found out, here's the LLC name, here's what she paid for the property, $1.43 million. And by looking at this information down here, it would tell you if there was any debt on the property. As you can see, there is no debt listed. So you know she paid cash for this property. So everything that you probably didn't want exposed was exposed. I mean, in her case, this could have easily been corrected. I'll show you how to do this the right way. Someone with her means, you would figure she could have spent a few bucks, hired someone with the knowledge, and they would ensure that this story would have never broke, because it would not be tied back to her, because no one would know what she is purchasing because of the way the entities are set up. Instead, I mean, now she's resigned, as I understand it, from that chapter, whatever it is with BLM. And I think a lot of it stemmed from the fact that it created negative publicity. And so when we're thinking about asset protection, I think it's really important that we focus on protecting ourselves, because there are people out there who want to use social media and they want to use local media as well to beat you over the head, assassinate your character, to bring pressure to bear, to get you to capitulate to their unreasonable demands. Because once it's out there, it's hard for you to defend. They throw it out there. Oh, this person likes to, they could say that you're a rapist, or they could throw anything out there. And I know that's an extreme example, and you could sue someone for that, for defamation. But my point is, once that's there, I used to joke about this. You serve someone a lawsuit, you serve them if you know they're having a dinner party. You serve them at work, at the office. So it brings pressure upon them, because even if they say, oh, I'm innocent, you know what people are going to think. Well, then why are you being served? If you're so innocent, why is this going on? So another context of where this came up recently is I have a client and he's flipping real estate. So he has this corporation set up in Florida. And the reason he started working with me is that he'd created this company and he owns it, his Florida Inc. And he flipped this house. And this person who bought the property, well, she wasn't too happy with her purchase. She felt that, there were some things with the property that should have been upgraded, should have been taken care of by the seller. The seller didn't do it in his rehab. So she ended up finding him, hunting him down. And when he sold it, he actually sold it through a limited liability company that was owned by his Florida corporation. So what she did is, obviously, she looked at the LLC, and this LLC happened to be a Virginia LLC. The Virginia LLC had his corporation listed as its member. So she went here, that pointed her to here. Once she was here, she saw his name listed on this entity. And now she skip traced him, found out his home address, and she found out his cell phone number, got his email, and then she started sending them threats. And then basically she said this: I'm going to destroy you on social media. I'm going to go to the local media station here and tell them how you ripped me off, and I'm going to get people to investigate you. And, his response, thankfully, was, hey, go for it. And I'll sue you if you do this, because you had a realtor who represented you in this transaction. You had your opportunity to go in and do an inspection. If something was missed on your inspection, that's on you. That's not on me. Okay, I filled out my disclosure form. There's nothing on my disclosure form that you're complaining about here and saying I failed to disclose. You just may not be happy with your purchase now. And so it worked out in his favor, thankfully. But the point is, if you're put in that situation, how does that make you feel? Because that's just a distraction for you having to run your business. And I've seen the power of social media and how people can hide behind it. And it's as if they have all the protections, right? They're out there doing things to you, putting up fake posts, assassinating your character, and you got to go to court to get those companies, internet companies, to take that information down. They don't have to prove that it's true. They can post anything they want. You have to prove that it's not true. And that is where it gets so frustrating. And why I'm impassioned about it is when I was younger, when my wife and I were first married, whenever I would leave, I used to work at UPS. And so I had to start at 2:30 in the morning. And an individual would call up and harass my wife as soon as I'd left for a while there. And I called the phone company. I said, who the hell is this? They said, we can't give you that information. That's private. And I said, that is insanity, that someone can call my house from a blocked number and they have the ability to contact me, but I don't know who that person is that has contacted me. And they can do it repeatedly. I said, they gave up their right to privacy as soon as they picked up the phone and dialed my number. You guys are morons, but that's just the way the law is. And so working in the confines, I think that really formed a lot of how I approach things. And I tell people, hey, you don't need to know who's involved here. It's my business. It's none of your business, because the more information you have, the more harm I feel you can do. So I desire to keep things private. We do a lot of that for our clients. And so when we're looking at privacy, also I want you to keep in mind that it's not something you're going to use in all aspects of your life. Okay. I always break it down. I say there's two sides of this. There's the active side of your life where you're running a business, and then there's the investment side of your life. So over here, where you have your business, you don't want anonymity on this side. No anonymity there. Where you're representing the company, you're trying to grow, let's say, a floral business or something like that, or a law firm. It's not going to behoove you, because if it's about you and you're the personality behind it, then people are going to know it's you. And you can try all you want to protect yourself, but eventually they're still going to know it's you, because your personality is the driving factor of that business. But if it's not, then there are steps we can take to protect it. And I'll show you an example of that. And then on the other side, on the investment side, definitely all your investments should be protected using LLCs and limited partnerships and statutory trusts and so forth, but set them up in a way that no one can find you. Because really what happens is when they go out there and they do that asset search, they're looking to see whether or not you're worth suing. And if you have that information available, it's out there, people are going to sue you. For example, here's what happened with another guy that was flipping properties. He had a corporation set up, owning an LLC. Again, same scenario. And I know this is another flipping example, but he had 3 properties here. Inside of here, he flips one property. And again, another disgruntled buyer of the property, tracks down the LLC, knows it's owned by his corp, knows him as well, contacts the attorney over here. The attorney then serves him a letter saying they're going to sue the LLC, file lis pendens against the 2 properties, unless they pay him $35,000 or $50,000. I forget what it was. It was some egregious amount of money. And they put the screws to him. And they were able to do this because it was so easily tracked back to them. So we want to make sure that we're protecting it. So let's look at some of the common assets that we have that we want to protect. I'm just going to kind of go through these things. First, let's talk about your house, okay, your personal residence. Now, a couple of months back, and I don't know the backstory here, how they found out about it. There was a doctor, I believe it was Virginia or somewhere on the East Coast, and there was a individual, an ex-NFL player who had some mental issues, and he went to his house and he shot up some of the family members. And I had to ask myself, how did he find out where he lived? Did he follow him from the clinic one day back to his house, or did he just look it up and do what I did through DataTree to figure out where he lived? And that's how he knew where to go. And so things like that, I want to take your house and get it out of your name. So to move your house out of your name, the entity I like to use for that is what is called a land trust. If you're not familiar with a land trust, it is a title holding vehicle. It does not provide asset protection. It's designed strictly to hold title to an asset. The only state in which you're going to get asset protection is Florida. So you set up a land trust. I always draw them with greens, this green box here. And the thing about it, doesn't need to be filed anywhere. It doesn't need to be registered. You set up this document, you create it, you're the beneficiary of the trust down here. And then you need to have a trustee of your trust, because title is going to be transferred into the name of a trustee. So for example, if the house was owned in Karen's name, all right, and she set up this trust, and we'll call it the Green Trust, then Karen is going to transfer the title to the name of the trustee of the Green Trust. All right, so you need to fill in this blank right here. That is going to be your trustee name. Well, who's going to be the trustee of the trust? Well, if we put Karen there, there's no anonymity, right? You moved it from Karen to Karen as trustee of the Green Trust. Okay, I can figure that out. So determining who's going to be your trustee is what we're looking at. This is how you're going to obtain anonymity for your residence. You get it out of your name, you put it into an entity that is no longer associated back to you. A creditor or someone who's just curious cannot run an asset search on your trust to see who the parties are, because the trust isn't recorded anywhere. It's a private document. The only information that is recorded that tells the world at large this trust exists is a deed. And that's what I'm referring to here. The deed that is recorded, transferring the real estate from Karen's name to that trust, is what someone can search if they went to the county recorder's database. So you need to decide who you want to be your trustee. Now you can choose, I'm a trustee on thousands upon thousands of trusts. It's funny. I wish I had it right now. A document. My wife called me today, and there was some curiosity in her voice, or in slight accusation, maybe, and she's a bit peeved because she received a letter or served from the city, I believe it was, regarding failure to register a piece of property as a rental, and all these back fees are owed on it. And they had my name on the top of it. She goes, "When did you buy property here? I didn't know we own property there." And of course, it's not my property. But the city doesn't know that because they looked at title and they probably farmed it out to some third party who then said, "All right, who is Clint Coons? Let's go find out where he lives." It tracked me down. Great. They figured out who I am. And they served me on this thing, or they sent it to my house. Why? Because this client of mine chose to use me as their trustee of their trust. So when you look on title to this property, my name appears on there, on the deed, but I don't own the property. But people assume that because I'm listed as a trustee. So this is what you can do with the land trust. And I receive notifications from individuals all the time. They text my cell phone because I've had the same number for 20 years. It's out there. They're able to skip trace it, find my phone number, and they text me, "Hey, you interested in selling this property? You interested in selling this property?" I've had an individual from Cairo 7 News named Jesse Jones contact me before, trying to find out information on our clients. I've had attorneys reach out to me, trying to foreclose on property, again, thinking that I'm the right party. And I have nothing to do with it. And I tell them that. And they get so frustrated because they realize they have to start over whatever it is they're doing. They're not talking to the right person, because when they contact me, I tell them this: A, it's my client. I'm not going to disclose any information. You know that, attorney-client privilege. B, you served the wrong party, partner, because I've already resigned my position. I have nothing to do with that trust. And so with a land trust, you're able to provide this anonymity shield around your property. You can transfer your property into it, and then you can build an anonymity shield around that house. So you're getting it out of your name, you're putting it into the trust. So now when someone searches for Karen's name, that house that was on 732 Olive is now no longer listed as Karen as the owner. It'll say Clint Coons, trustee of the Green Trust owner. That's one way to do it. Now, understandably, some of you may be uncomfortable with that, okay? Because this is maybe your first time seeing me live. You don't know that much about me. You haven't been exposed to Anderson. You're not working with us. And so there's hesitation there. You talk to your spouse, "Hey, we're going to move the property into this guy named Clint Coons and put it in his name. He's an attorney." She'd be like, "The hell? You think I trust an attorney to hold title to our house?" "Well, he really doesn't hold title." "Well, his name's on title, isn't it?" So you see what can happen. You're trying to explain that to someone else, and that can be create strife and hesitation. So you don't want to proceed with this. So if you don't want to use someone like myself, a professional, to be your trustee, then you would use, as Lyman just stated here, you could use a limited liability company in place of me. And that's something we actually ended up shifting to inside of Anderson a couple of years back. I quit serving as trustees, and I began convincing my clients, don't use me. Use a limited liability company on there as your trustee, but make sure that the LLC provides you anonymity, as I'm going to show you here in a moment. So you could also just swap that out and set up your own LLC as a trustee. So we could call this Blue LLC, trustee of the Green Trust, and Blue LLC happens to be your LLC. So that's another way to handle it. But to put a little asterisk on this, your trustee really doesn't have any control over a land trust. The control rests with the beneficiaries, which is you down here. You're the beneficiary, so you have all the control. And also the trustee resigns. And so someone asked here, anonymous attendee, okay, see, they're on a seminar about anonymity and they came in as anonymous. Perfect. Love it. All right, so if you resign from the trust, wouldn't someone else's name appear and the search would continue? No, because the trust is a private document. Upon my resignation, it is not recorded anywhere. So when I resign, the world at large still thinks I'm involved with this trust. The only time the trust or the deed that is updated is when the successor trustee. So in this case, if I started out as the LLC and then Karen, she's the successor. So I resign my position. Now she becomes the trustee. She's not going to let the world at large know she's a trustee until she's looking to do one of two things, and that is to sell or refi the property. And what I mean by that is that she would then take a trustee's deed. This is something that I provide upon my resignation, appointing her as the trustee and showing, saying I resign, Karen's now the trustee. She would take that deed and record it. And upon her recording, the title would then reflect Karen as trustee, and I would no longer reflect my name as trustee. The reason why I started pushing more people to using an LLC and avoiding using me is that step right there of recording the deed that I provided you is forgotten at the time in which the client wishes to sell or refi. And so what would happen is, imagine this, you walk into a bank, hey, I want to refi my house on 732 Olive. And they're like, okay, and your name is? Oh, my name's Karen. Great. And they pull up title and they're looking at you and they say, well, Karen, are you transgender? Did you go through a sex change? Because it says Clint Coons on title, right? And you don't look like a dude right now. So you could see what would happen. They're going to be like, where's this Clint guy? So that's the problem you have in doing that. And so it throws into chaos what you're trying to accomplish. So that's why I tell people, you have to set up your own LLC and then you can avoid this altogether. So the successor trustee is listed in the trust document. It is not listed on title. Now, Douglas says, why not just mortgage the property to the hilt, strip the equity out, and hide the money somewhere else? You can do that. You can definitely do that. But still, your name's on title. And so think about this, Douglas. The other advantage of getting your name off of title and putting it into a land trust where it provides you anonymity, if somebody gets a judgment against you, that judgment won't stick to your house. So your house could still be sold or refinanced in the name of the trust, and any personal judgments that you have that are recorded against you in the county will not attach. Personal judgments only attach to assets that are in your name because it's personal. This house, even though it's a personal residence, it's no longer in your name. So you're actually accomplishing a couple things by doing this, ensuring that if somebody gets a judgment against you individually, that judgment will not impair your ability to refi or sell your property. And so that's one of the strategies I like to use for a personal residence. So Gigi says, on a land trust, the deed of trust is recorded. You have to put the grantor's name on that deed, which is usually the beneficiary. Yeah, so when you deed property into a trust, the owner of the property is the grantor. The grantee is the person who is the recipient of the property. So in my example on the deed, it would state Karen, grantor, Clint Coons, trustee of the Green Trust, grantee. And then when you run your subsequent title search for that address, my name would be listed as trustee under this trust name as the owner of the property. And Bonnie, I do see your question here. I'm just not answering it yet because I haven't got to the LLCs. I will cover that in limited liability companies. So is an LLC, is the LLC a U.S. entity? Yes, it is a U.S. entity. So I've asked, what if they need to serve an important paper or lawsuit and have the address or name to serve it to? Will the house get a lien without you knowing about it? Good question. All right, so let's assume that someone's coming after you. If this property is in a trust, they're not going after the property in the trust unless you quit paying your mortgage and then you know already what's going on. For example, one of my clients in California had defaulted on a note, and the attorney that was pursuing an action to foreclose on that property was trying to get in contact with the owner, and they thought I was the owner because I was listed as a trustee. And of course I'm not. So they're trying to serve me. And I said, I can't accept service on this. I'm not the trustee of the trust. The person who's the actual owner of that property, to say that they didn't know someone was coming after them, it would be pretty disingenuous of them to say that, because you say, what, you just think you could quit paying your mortgage and nothing's going to happen? Not to mention, like, when we're contacted and I receive that type of correspondence, I forward that on to my client. Now, if you had an LLC set up, they would serve the LLC. What they're going to do is they're going to serve the registered agent of your limited liability company. Your registered agent would then forward you that correspondence. So the trustee would get served in that case. And so you would receive notice of anything that was going on with respect to that particular asset itself. So yeah, so if it was a trip and fall lawsuit on a piece of property, that's how they would get you notice, by going after or serving your registered agent for that. All right, so that's one way to set up an anonymity screen, is to use a land trust. Now, the other way we set these things up, the other entities we like to use would be limited liability companies, setting them up to ensure that you have privacy, so someone cannot look and determine who is the owner behind this company. That is why whenever you're setting up an LLC in which you desire privacy, the first thing is you do not want to be the organizer. Okay, just like I showed you earlier, you do not want to be. Do not want to be the organizer. You can't be the organizer of your entity, because if you are, you've already just blown your anonymity. Number two, can't use address, okay, that is associated with you. If you're using an address for that business entity, like a business address that ties back to you, you've just blown your anonymity. Okay, so you don't want to do that. Number three, do not serve as your own registered agent. I'm just going to put RA here for registered agent. Patrice, that's what she did. She was her own registered agent. Big red flag, mistake. All right, so that's the first three things that you have to do when you're setting up an LLC. Now, the fourth aspect of setting up the LLC is who's going to be its member or manager managed, okay? Which one do we use when we're creating that company? So when you're setting up a limited liability company, and Bonnie, this goes right to your question. When you're setting up an LLC, there are two forms of LLCs that you can set up. One is referred to as a manager managed LLC, and the other one is referred to as a member managed LLC. And it is pretty much what it implies, okay? When you set up a manager managed LLC like this, you're going to have a manager right here, one or more, okay, managers that control the company. So they control it. And then you're going to have members down here who are owners. These are owners, right? So they're not involved in the decision making. We have managers that do that. And so in most instances, when you set up a manager managed entity, the state will ask for the manager's information, address and name. So you have to disclose that. So if I wanted to create a limited liability company in Washington State, and it was going to be a manager managed LLC, I would have to disclose my name and my address to the state of Washington, so then I would be associated with that LLC. The second type of form you have, governance form of LLC, is a member managed. And in a member managed, we don't have managers. We just have members who exercise control over the LLC. So not only the owners, they're also managers. And in that instance, the state will ask you to list all of those individuals. Now, some states will ask you to list both. So if you set up a manager managed, they would say, give us the manager's information and the member's information. So you have to know your state. This is where a lot of people make mistakes when they're creating these companies, is that their name will appear on a statement of information, on the actual articles that get submitted. And unfortunately, once your name appears there, you're then typically going to be within the chain of recordings. So I have clients come to me all the time and say, Clint, I set up this entity up 4 years ago. My name was associated with the last 4 years. I want you to do something to make my name disappear. I don't want to be associated with this entity anymore. Okay, we can do that, but understand that if you have an aggressive creditor and they search through that history, or if that history is searchable, you're going to be tied to that entity. And so I can't cut those threads because you can't redact that information from the Secretary of State. So your truest and best form of anonymity is to start over. Now, that's not practical in all situations, and I realize that, and I'll show you a little side shuffle we do to deal with existing entities. So knowing that you have states that are going to collect this information right here, what you need to do is start with a state as a base entity that only collects the information from here up, okay? We want to set up an entity to begin with that does not collect information on the members or managers. And there's several states out there that you can set up an entity this way. There's about 20 of them that you can set it up where they're not going to ask for any members or managers information. Now, what I like to do is I like to set up my entity in Wyoming. I typically will use, I use Delaware as well, but I like to set one up in Wyoming. And I set it up like this. I set up this Wyoming LLC right here. And this is my base entity. And I will set it up as manager managed. So this is a perfect example. Our daughter, Tracy and I, our daughter has now just closed on her second rental property, and she bought it in the name of a limited liability company. We set up a Wyoming LLC for her for this property. And so she set it up. Actually, she works for us now here at Anderson, and she knows how to set these things up. So she set it up for herself, and she set it up as a manager managed LLC where she's the manager and she's also the member. And when she was filing the articles to get it set up, all Wyoming wanted to know is who's a registered agent. That's Anderson. Who is the organizer? Well, it's not my daughter. It's going to be someone else in the firm's names got listed there. And they wanted to know a business address. Well, we gave it our business address in Wyoming. So this entity is set up with complete anonymity. Nothing ties back to her. So no one would know that she has this entity set up. Now, from there, once you've got this entity established, this is your base layer of protection for anonymity right here, because no one knows can tie this entity back to you. Now, people will say, well, Clint, what about the bank? Well, yeah, the bank's going to know. They have to know. You're not going to get a bank account set up. What about the IRS? Because you get an EIN number. Yeah, the IRS gets to know as well. We're not talking about those people. I'm talking about creditors. Anybody who has access to data to your computer is not going to find this out because you're not going to be listed on there. Now, Mike says, what about the Corporate Transparency Act and FinCEN? Yeah, the regulations are coming out by December for the Corporate Transparency Act. I got a video on my YouTube channel talking about it. But again, unless the government is hacked, which has happened, right? That information isn't getting out there. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's like saying, you know, I don't want to turn my information over to the IRS. Well, don't. You won't get an EIN number. But if you want an EIN number so you can open a bank account, you better do it. Or I don't want to give the bank my information, but I want to be a signer on the account. Okay, great. We'll see how far that gets you. You have to give this information up to governmental agencies, but that information is not on a public searchable database. So that's what we're looking for when we're doing this, making sure that that information is out there. Now, then what we'll do is we're going to set up an LLC in the other states. So wherever the property is located. So let's assume that you had an asset located in Ohio. You had a property in Ohio, right here, this house in Ohio. Then I would create an Ohio LLC right up here. And I'm going to set this entity up. Again, I'm not going to be the organizer, so my name won't appear there. I'm not going to use my address. And so when we set these things up, we provide our clients an address in Nevada. So you can actually have an Ohio LLC with a Nevada address. And the reason we do that is so it keeps our clients' information private. Now, if you didn't want to do that, you went up and set up a PO box, brand new one, you could do that, but you don't want to be your own registered agent. So we got those three issues, doom, 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 1, 2, 3, all done, covered. We're not disclosing the information. And then it's going to get down to what type of entity. Am I creating a manager managed or a member managed? Okay. what you want to do is you want to set it up as member managed. So this Ohio LLC is going to be member managed. Right? Who's going to be the member? Wyoming LLC. So on the actual Ohio submission, and it asks for the member, you would put down the Wyoming LLC. So if the Wyoming LLC is none of your BS LLC, that's what you're going to list there. None of your BS LLC. And you know what's interesting about this is many times they don't even ask for the address associated with the member. But if they did, we would give it our Las Vegas address. And the reason I do this, even though it's a Wyoming entity, why do I give it a mailing address in Nevada? Because it creates this conundrum for anyone who looks at this entity. Because if they look at that entity and they see that it's an Ohio LLC and the only information that's disclosed to it is the registered agent and address in Las Vegas and none of your BS LLC, then if they're trying to figure out who's involved, they have to go find none of your BS LLC with the hopes that that's going to disclose someone's information. But none of your BS LLC, it doesn't state it's Wyoming. They're going to assume possibly it's Nevada. So they look in Nevada and they're not going to find it registered there, but they might find one in California. They might find one in Florida. They might find one in Massachusetts. They might find one in Illinois, and they could find one in Wyoming. And then the question is, which is the right entity? So when you're doing this, it creates a real problem for people trying to search back. And if they did figure out it's a Wyoming one, Wyoming doesn't disclose any information. So setting this up in this manner provides you tremendous amount of anonymity, and you create all your investment LLCs in the same context, boom, 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 all held by this one company. If you have savings accounts, brokerage accounts, many times I would recommend you have a separate blue box for those. You set them up. Now, what happens if you have that orphan entity that you set up on your own with LegalZoom several years ago and you realize, hey, this is just a mess, I screwed it up, but it has assets? Do you shut it down and transfer everything around? You could, but what I would typically recommend, what we would do is we would keep that entity in place. So this is your existing orphan that you have. And I would turn around and set up what I call a personal property trust, a PPT. It's kind of like the land trust. And I would make the personal property trust the member of this orphan LLC, and then make the beneficiary the Wyoming LLC. So that's one of the ways in which we bring in existing entities into this overall structure architecture that we're planning, but without disclosing the fact that, hey, this entity is now owned by here. And the reason why I don't want to do that is because if I were to just put this entity into the blue box and someone were to do an asset search on the red box here, and they would see your name listed last year, going back 5 years, and then they see you transferred it to a blue box, they may put 2 and 2 together and say, oh, he set up a Wyoming LLC to hold his interest. And once they've got that thread and they know that that Wyoming LLC is you, then it's just a matter of them going through all these other ones and saying, these are all you too, because they're owned by this Wyoming LLC. So for orphan companies, existing entities you got out there, we always run them through a personal property trust. All right. So Bonnie, you wanted to know what's the difference between member managed and manager managed. We talked about that. Would I cover a series LLC or sub-series LLC? I think this is what I just covered here, where this is, you can think of, the blue box as your foundation right here. And these are all little child LLCs that are owned by it. Okay. And then you want to know if real estate LLCs using multiple assumed names, can you get away with having a bunch of different names? Yeah. So that's a good point she brings up. What do you name these things? All right. The first mistake I think that a lot of people make when they're creating new entities, and I'm guilty as charged, is you find a name that you like. And let's assume that the name is Evergreen Properties. And then when you create additional entities, your Originality is as follows: evergreen properties 1, evergreen properties 2, 3, 4. So if someone were to look, they're going to know all this is part of the same company. And so I like to have different names because I don't want people to associate all these businesses back into one common enterprise. That's the first reason. Second reason why, because I guarantee you will forget which entity does what. I know I did when I was much younger and I could remember things a lot better. It became a problem. So I purposely quit doing that myself. And so I like to have different names. If an LLC never had any property, how do you close it? You file articles of dissolution with the state. All right, Joyce wants to know, it seems that an attorney such as you, would it be a good idea to be listed in the event a potential attorney or creditor calls about a property? Okay, so Joyce, when you're saying listing me, that would be as a trustee. Yeah, I do. That is the one benefit where I serve as a trustee, is that if somebody calls, I'm a buffer. I have that attorney-client privilege, so it creates this additional stumbling block for them, but it comes at the cost of you having to make a snap decision with that property. If you want to sell it or something like that, you got to remember, you got to record that deed when that time comes, so you get my name off of there. And that's where I think a lot of people break down, in my experience in doing this. Okay, so does this apply to a physician-owned business? What I just showed you, it does not. In a physician-owned business, you're going to have to list the physician as the member. If you've already established my LLC using my own name and the registered agent, is there any way to clean that up? Well, again, you do this. You would just, so in this orphan LLC example, we come in, we appoint Anderson as the registered agent there. We make the member the PPT. We change the business address to Nevada. We can do something like that, but it's not, you're still going to be in the chain and still going to associate back to you. So you can't fully get away from that other than just shutting it down. So who's a registered agent of the Wyoming LLC? It's a commercial company like Anderson. We serve as registered agent. Then how do you maintain anonymity with Wyoming LLC when you manage your own properties? Great question. So when you're managing your own properties, how are you maintaining anonymity? Now, I got this interesting comment on one of my YouTube videos where I talk about using this strategy, because what I told people, I said, hey, so here's your structure. And let's assume that all your properties that you've set up here are located in Colorado. Now, as you bring in tenants, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll have a property management entity here. So there's your property management entity up here that you work for. So you introduce yourself to the tenants as the property manager, not the owner. And if they ask you who the owner is, you say, I don't know, some LLC that owns the property, some investor. You don't disclose your own information. Somebody criticized me for saying that. Actually, I went so far as to say this, hey, you know, when you're the property manager, if you're not the owner, let's say you got a disgruntled tenant who's upset because they don't have a refrigerator with an ice maker in it, and they think that is standard place, and every house should have an ice maker in their refrigerator because they don't want to fill their own tray up with water. And they're upset. Yeah, I mean, you could always say, yeah, you know, that owner, I think he's an SOB. I really don't get along with them myself either. And I know how hard it can be to work with them. She goes, oh, that's just lying to your tenants. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe some days you feel that way about yourself. So who's to say you're lying there? So you want to use it in a way in which you're controlling it, but you don't let anyone know that you own it. And that's how you make this work. What should we research? Stephen asks, what should we research to see if states require entity disclosure? You just got to look at the filing online. What's required to set up an LLC, and you'll know right then and there. The other benefit of having a Wyoming LLC in your picture goes beyond just anonymity. It also gives you additional charging order protection. So if you're sued personally, it adds this additional layer for you, because it has very strong protections against outside creditors. So somebody comes against you here, they're going to go up against here and typically get repelled. They can't get into the LLC to get the assets. They can't force you to make distributions out of that LLC. They can't foreclose on your interest. So it's doing that for you. It's also, we set it up from a tax standpoint, we're making this a partnership for tax purposes. And the reason why I'm doing that is that I'm looking to to change how that income hits your 1040. I want to make you look better to lenders. I want to reduce your risk of audit. And so by having this one entity as a partnership that consolidates all of these down into it, it minimizes how many returns you're filing. You're just filing one tax return. So even though you could set up your entities, let's say in Maryland, and they don't ask for any information, you set up 20 of them and it's you and your spouse owning it, you're going to file 20 tax returns. So you really need a holding company. Why not set up a holding company that's also going to give you the anonymity and the charging order protections? Because if Maryland ever decided to change, like New York did, in changing their laws, at least you have that established there so that that anonymity shield is in place. How about a Wyoming statutory trust? So if you live in California, that's a popular tool, and I typically limit its use to California. And a Wyoming statutory trust is an entity that it's like an LLC from an asset protection standpoint. That is, if something goes wrong with the property, the asset protection piece here protects it, so it stays inside. But the way you set up the statutory trust, it's like a land trust, but it just provides asset protection. That's the only difference because it's registered with the state. So we have to have a trustee. And the way I set them up is I use an LLC as a trustee, a Wyoming LLC like this as a trustee. And the reason I do that is because the trustee has to go on the filings. So it has to be listed on the filing with Wyoming. And then when you register this business in California, this trust in California, you have to list the trustee. But the one thing that we do with our trust is that I'm listed as what is referred to as a signatory trustee. So it says, so it states that this Wyoming LLC is a trustee, then I'll say Clint Coons signatory. And the reason I'm a signatory trustee is because in the trust document, it states that I have one purpose only in this trust, and that is to submit the filing to the state and sign that document. So my name will be listed there and I'm the one signing. Otherwise, you would have to sign on behalf of your LLC, and that blows the whole structure. So the Wyoming Statutory Trust, it's a great tool for investors in California because you want to avoid that $800 franchise fee. And that's why the trust gets you around that. And again, many times we'll have a holding company as the beneficiary of this trust for tax reasons and for lending purposes when we're setting it up. All right. So got some of those done. Let's see what else we have. But if your LLC is a beneficiary not recorded anywhere, only the trustee is on public record. So the name is public and any plaintiff will know who to serve the trustee. If the trustee had resigned, it doesn't accept papers and you'll never find out about the lawsuit. I think we already covered that, right? You can use your LLC as a trustee, or this is why you use an attorney or a law firm. Because when we get the papers, we're going to forward those on to our clients. If you pick your friend that lives 2 counties away to be your trustee and he moves to Texas, you're right. You may never know. So that's why you have to be careful on who you choose. Cynthia wants to know, what is a charging order? So a charging order, Cynthia, is one of the hallmark features of using limited liability companies or limited partnerships, that when the entity is set up in the appropriate state that gives you this protection, it prevents a creditor from attaching the assets inside of the LLC. It basically means this. If I have a charging order on you, against you, so I get a judgment against you right here. So a judgment's entered against you for $500,000 in favor of this individual down here that you ran into. So they want to collect on this judgment. They find out you have this LLC, and this LLC owns a bunch of red boxes like this. Maybe you have 2 of them, two LLCs, and this one has $400,000 in a brokerage account and cash and savings. So you've got these 2 structures set up. Well, the creditor, if you have these set up in Wyoming, which the charging order is the sole remedy, would then approach you and say, all right, what do you own? You tell them you own these 2 blue boxes. Then they would look up the law and they would say that with respect to those blue boxes, the only remedies available for a creditor of a member is what is this charging order. And so they would apply to a court to get a charging order on the LLC. And the charging order, the judge would tell you this. They would tell you, all right, if you want to take any money out of your LLC as a distribution, so a distribution is something that is paid to the member for being a member, profits distributed to them. If you want to take out a distribution out of your companies, then that distribution must be paid to your creditor until you've paid off this $500,000. So they're going to force you to pay your creditor if you ever take money out. But if you never take any money out, the creditor never gets paid. So the charging order evens the playing field, maybe even gives you a little more sway in any negotiations, because you can tell your creditor, say, listen, these LLCs aren't distributing any money. So you're not going to get paid if you want to come after me here, and you know it. In fact, what you can do with these types of structures is you can pay yourself out a loan out of the LLC, and it bypasses your creditors because that's not a distribution. If you come to the next event that we're going to be teaching, I actually provide an example. I go through one of my clients who was unfortunately the creditor, and I show you how many entities this person had and how the money was flowing, and she knew all of this, but she never got paid because that charging order prevented her from collecting on over a $2 million judgment. That's what we're doing for you by setting this up and putting that in place. So, question here, would it make sense to have a stock account be incorporated as a manager? Would it make sense to have a stock account? Maybe you're asking, should it be in a Wyoming LLC or Nevada? It should be in a Wyoming. I don't use Nevada anymore unless you have assets in Nevada. Because in Nevada, they ask for who the managers are of your LLC, and you have to use a nominee. And that just makes it very difficult to open up bank accounts when you put a nominee on there. Wyoming, there's no information listed, so it's easier to open up the bank account. You've been told that Nevada is the best place to create LLCs for asset protection. That's just incorrect. That company probably only makes money off selling Nevada LLCs. We used to set up a lot of entities in Nevada, and here's what happened. They changed the rules, okay? Number one, they jacked their fees. Strike number one. Then they imposed a business tax. Strike number two, although they've changed that now. The third problem, which is the more pressing issue for our clients, is that when we would create a structure in Nevada, an LLC, Nevada wanted to know who the manager was. So we used my partner, Toby Mathis. We would list A.T. Mathis, nominee manager. And he would do the exact same thing I'm doing on the land trust. He would resign, appoint our client as the manager. They're listed in the document as the manager. And then we would turn around, we'd ask our client, do you want a bank account with B of A, Chase, or Wells Fargo? And they say, oh, we like using Wells. Okay, not a problem. Then we would send all the information over to our contact at Wells Fargo and say, this is our client. We have verified them. Here's a copy of their driver's license, bank statement or whatnot, the information you need to get the account opened. They would then process the account, send it out to the state where our client's located. Our client would go in and do their signature cards at their local branch, and then they would have their account set up. Well, the banks summarily stopped that process on us and would no longer allow us to create the entities because they wanted the client to come into the branch so they could sell you all their other ridiculous services they're going to push on you. And so once that happened, it put people in a difficult position, because if they took their LLC to Chase to open up an account, Chase is going to look at the Secretary of State of Nevada to see who's listed as the member or manager. And they're going to see this guy named A.T. Mathis. And they're going to ask you, who's A.T. Mathis? And they're going to say, we won't open the account unless A.T. Mathis is here. Well, A.T. Mathis is not going on your account as a signer. So that really killed Nevada for us. And that's why we no longer set them up there. For the most part, we don't set them up there. We don't use anonymity unless you want to do member managed with your Wyoming company. Then you'd still need a Wyoming component. So do you get an EIN? Yes, you get an EIN for your entities. Would you use this in a professional LLCs? No, I would not set up a professional LLC with anonymity, because you're professional, your name's going to have to typically be associated with it. David wants to know, if you want to do business in each state, can you use a holding company for any state to avoid state fees? This is on a case-by-case basis. Let me just show you. This structure is something I did for that client in Florida. All right, so concerned about anonymity, he flips properties, he owns some properties, and he said to me, he goes, I don't want anybody to figure out what I have. No way, no how. So I said, all right, so we're going to start with your Florida entity down here. Okay, here's this Florida Corp. Didn't need to change anything there. Keep that Florida Corp in play. I didn't need to shut it down. I said, keep it. You have a couple of years of history there with the IRS. We'll keep that in place. But your problem is that people trace it back to you, so they know it's you. So I'm going to put a blocker LLC in place here. I'm going to create this one Wyoming LLC right here. It's going to be owned by your Florida corporation. So I'm going with this. Now this Wyoming LLC is going to own we set up a Washington, DC LLC for him because he flips there as well. I set a Washington, DC series. And that's going to be owned 100% by your Wyoming LLC, just like that. So if anybody looks here, they see this. They never see the corporation now. Now, this individual also flips property in Virginia. So for the Virginia flips, because the series structure in Virginia isn't that great, we can't really accomplish it the way we want to with anonymity purposes without disclosing his information. I said, hey, why don't we just flip in Wyoming LLCs in Virginia? So we set up Wyoming LLCs for him to flip in Virginia. Now, I'm aware of this. I've run into this problem myself with some of my own deals. When you're flipping through an out-of-state entity, many times there's going to be a withholding on taxes. They'll impound money to make sure that they get their tax revenue on that. And the thing is, you get your money back, right? So they'll withhold, say, 20% of the sales price. And so if you sold it for $200,000 or holding back 40 grand and your profit's only 20, you're thinking, this sucks. Yeah, you're going to get your money back, but you have to file a tax return, and states don't like sending money back right away. So what we did is we created a second Wyoming LLC that's owned by his corporation. And so we call this one as JV LLC. And so every flip that we have this JV LLC file a notice of interest against the property. Why am I doing that? I'm filing the notice of interest against each of these properties so that when you go to sell, title will contact this entity right here. The title is going to, so we notice you have a notice of interest that has been recorded against this property. What does that have to do with? Well, I'm in a joint venture relationship with this company that's selling the property, and I'm entitled to this amount of money. Well, that amount of money happens to equate to about 99% of the sales of your profit on that sale. So here's the example. Let's say that I'm selling a property and there's $50,000 profit in the deal. This LLC is going to be owed $49,900. So out of escrow, title is going to cut a check for $49,900 to this entity. So what does that do for me? Number one, don't have to worry about the withholding, the taxes being impounded anymore with this company, because that is a payment that gets paid out of escrow. It's not money going to the LLC that would be withheld. The second thing about it as well is that we don't have to open a bank account to worry about moving the monies around through these companies because he's doing lots of deals. So we're keeping him having to open and shut accounts all the time by keeping this one as the one that's filing that notice of interest. And the thing about it is if anybody looks at this company, if anybody looks here, if they look at the property to see what the lien holders are, it's all anonymity across the board. I'm probably confused some of you, and you're going, what the hell did he just say? I'm just trying to show you what you can do, right? How creative you want to get. This person wants to get creative with me. So I enjoy doing this because it's fun. You know, how can we put this stuff together so if somebody's out there trying to impugn your character, we're going to make it really hard for them to figure out who's involved or an attorney wanting to come after you. I want them to look at something like this and say, screw it. Unless you're going to give me $25,000, I don't have the time to deal with it. And so that's what we're doing when we create these types of setups for you. It's about dissecting what your business is about, how we can go about, putting you in a position where someone can't trace it back to you. All right. So what if you don't live in the USA? Can you set up a Wyoming LLC? And does it work for if you have properties in another country? I don't know. I mean, you can set up a Wyoming LLC if you're not a US resident, but I don't know how it works in the other countries. Does it make sense to have a California or that Wyoming LLC as member manager for California? Yeah, for California, if you want to avoid the franchise fee, use a Wyoming Statutory Trust. You will have to pay that on the Wyoming LLC, But if you have 10 properties, you're only paying on the one Wyoming LLC trustee, not on all 10 statutory trusts. What is a recommended protocol if we own multiple orphan properties in California free and clear? Use the statutory trust. I mean, I've got a client doing 4 properties in the process of doing refis on all 4 inside of the trust, Wyoming Statutory Trust with Chase Bank of all places. Is there an easy way to transfer from Nevada to Wyoming? Yes, there is. Washington, good to see you on here. We actually, if we're still handling your entities, we do that for our clients, move it over. You just transition it out of Nevada and into Wyoming. We've done that a lot over the past couple of years. And I live in Texas. Should I set up with Wyoming? Yeah, if you live in Texas and you have rental real estate, maybe you're using a series LLC. I mean, this is very common. I create a Wyoming company here, and then I set up a series LLC up here owned by my Wyoming LLC. And then I keep creating cells for all my deals, all pointing back to this that rolls down to here, and it gives you complete anonymity. How do you prevent a person from stealing your company due to greed? Well, I mean, anybody could say you're right. They could try to go out there and commit fraud, but that's when people ask me, how do you commit someone from stealing your property and filing a false deed? You can't really. I mean, I know there are some procedures. I cut a video on it a couple of weeks ago that you can look at to see whether or not your county offers some form of protection there, but most of them don't. And it's really difficult to prevent any fraudulent behavior from occurring if someone was so inclined to do so. So if they set up an LLC, or they brought an operating agreement into a bank and they said it was theirs, I mean, you're right, Chase could open up another account, but it's not your account. They're not going to have access to your existing account because you're the only signer on that account. So they wouldn't give them access there, especially if they looked up the EIN number. It's going to be associated back to you. Do you have an office in Houston? No, we don't, but we work nationwide. We work with people all over the country. We have a lot of clients in Texas, a lot in Houston. I'm a big investor in Houston myself outside the Beltway. I think I have about 50 properties there. So we work all over. I often hate to set up an LLC. I'm in Maryland, only 45 minutes from Delaware. Should I use Delaware? John, yeah, set one up in Delaware. I like Delaware. You know, on the East Coast, I probably 30% of the time I'm using Delaware for my clients. There's no reason why you just have to go to Wyoming. Delaware offers great protection. Joyce wants to know, we set up a C Corp through Anderson. I'm the sole owner. Our personal address is on our tax return. However, Anderson used our address when setting up the C Corp. So we have anonymity from creditors under our C Corp and under our personal name. Yeah, if your name isn't associated on the filing with the state, you have anonymity. You don't have anonymity from the IRS. We wouldn't set it up that way. What do you recommend to own stock accounts? I would set up a Wyoming LLC for your stock account. If you're an active trader, I would then take this Wyoming LLC, and then we would create a personal property trust over here. And typically it's as follows. You have to be an active trader, so you need real-time feeds. That's what you're going for. Active trader, okay, and less than 250K. So if you're an active trader with a brokerage account less than $250,000 in value, then we create a personal property trust to get you the real-time feeds. That PPT is owned by your Wyoming LLC. I heard Delaware and Nevada were the best for the LLC. I'm in Maryland. Should I use Delaware? We already talked about that. Okay. There's a system that is out there to allow foreign investment to set up an LLC or an entity like your system. I don't remember off of, but it exists. I don't know about that, David, about foreign systems out there. Is statutory trust revocable? Well, there's a process for that. It's an entity. It's like an LLC. So you have to go through a statutory process. The lender I'm working with won't lend property in an LLC or a land trust. They suggest a revocable trust, but that makes me think of a living trust. Okay. So this is the beauty of a land trust. You don't tell them you're using a land trust. You tell them you're using a grantor trust. You just set it up to make it look like a living trust Once you get your refi done, you convert it into a land trust by a restatement. Do this all the time with my clients. They have a land trust. That's why we never use the word land in the land trust. We just call it the 465 trust. Whenever they go into refi the property, they should contact me. We restate the trust to make it look like a living trust, because Freddie Fannie will lend money or will refinance properties that are held in a living trust. They won't refinance properties held in a land trust unless you're in Illinois or Florida. And even those, sometimes the brokers won't do them because they have to be separately negotiated with Freddie Fannie. So as long as it's a grantor trust, underwriting will accept it. And then once you get the loan done, you just change it back. So you change the provisions back by doing another restatement. Done it multiple times. Actually, on my YouTube, I have an interview with an attorney that works for a broker. They represent a lot of brokers in Texas, mortgage brokers. And he was the one that originally, when I was doing this, he figured out what I was doing. He said, hey, it's beautiful. It's great. Love it. So yeah, that's how that would work. What about a stock account over 250K? Just set up an LLC. You don't need to use a personal property trust. Do you set up private trust? No, not necessarily. We don't set up any private trust, living trust, statutory trust, personal property trust. If somebody subpoenas the IRS records to identify the party who applied for the EIN, can they do that? Possibly. I don't know when, under what context that would be permitted, but I'm not saying that they couldn't possibly do it, but I haven't seen it done before. So yeah, so the 250 just had to do with the fact that you can get real-time feeds many times with a business entity, and they're not going to charge you anymore for the real-time feeds. So I talked about the difference between a revocable trust and a living trust. They're just both grantor trusts. They're the same. One set up for estate planning, the other one set up for title holding purposes. Do you have asset protection using a Wyoming statutory trust with a Wyoming holding company? Yes, you do. So what we typically do is we'll set up Wyoming statutory trust right here that offer anonymity. And then we put a Wyoming LLC down below like that. This is treated as a partnership for tax purposes. Okay, this is subject to $800 in California. Your trustee LLC on all of these is subject to $800 in California, but the statutory trusts are not. So we set them up. Okay. How about an active trader using a Roth? Just trade. If you're using an IRA, just trade your Roth IRA. Don't do anything. Okay. I gave you that specific example to be used for personal accounts, putting them into an LLC if you want to actively trade. A lot of brokers will charge their clients a higher exchange fee for those real-time feeds because they're a business account. They classify as a business trader. The way you get around it is to have a large account value with them, and then they'll waive the fees. And then I got two more here. How much does it cost to set something like this up? Well, it's going to depend on the complexity. You know, it could be $2,500 up to $10K, depending on how many LLCs you're creating, if you're going titanium level with us. So it just really depends. You know, one of the things you do is come to the events. People that attend the events, I will put together some incentives for you to help you get into these at less than what it would normally be. And that's why, you know, we got an event coming up in Florida that if you can make it out to that event, it's going to be live. Maybe, hopefully you're comfortable traveling. If you're not, I understand. I'll be there nevertheless. And then I believe we have one in October, which is going to be another virtual event. But live, you get so much more out of it. It's going to be the first one I've taught in a couple of years, so I'll probably be pretty darn rusty. And so what you're saying is if you don't know that you should not set up your LLC without being, you should not set it up if you're the organizer. If you've already set it up, then you want to use a PPT to move it into your Wyoming LLC. So if you already have a limited liability company established and you set up a Wyoming LLC, you have to use a personal property trust. Will one be in Northern California soon? Probably not, because it's California. We'll see what happens with the recall. Maybe things will change. All right, guys, with that, Kendall.
That's great, Clint. And I don't think you could ever be rusty. There's no way. Yeah, that's not possible with you, Clint. I don't think so. But maybe we'll see with the mask on. Who knows? I don't know.
No, I won't do that.
Okay. All right. Well, Clint, thank you so much. Seriously, incredible. We are excited to see you live again. It will be September 13th, 14th, and 15th at the Omni Champions Gate in Orlando. It'll be good to have you back. And Clint, I know it's always nice. People always ask, why come live? And I think for sure you mentioned this, but you do get more out of it. But you also have a team there to help answer questions one-on-one if they have them, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to answer questions on here. You miss nuances and the follow-ups and things like that. And it's just, I have more time. It's just a better learning environment. So. Yeah,
one-on-one's always nice. You can ask Clint's team, and they're incredible. It's amazing to me. We always have a lot of real estate investors who give us a call, and you get this all the time too, Clint, I'm sure. They're good at finding properties, but man, millions of dollars in assets, and they're still under their personal name. We find that all the time, and they think they're just fine. They're skating along. Their uncle has set them up, maybe an LLC or two here and there, and they get burned with a lawsuit. And so then it's too late. So that's why, for sure, Clint, we love working with Clint and his team, Anderson Advisors. Come see us in Orlando. They'll have some good incentives to be there for sure. Clint, is it okay? We do have protectwealth.com/Anderson if someone has something urgent.
Yep.
Is it okay? And I'll forward it on to your team, Clint. Anybody has any urgent questions, I'll forward them on to your team, and they can get in touch with you that way.
Excellent. All right, guys. Take care. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Clint. We look forward to seeing you pretty soon here in Orlando. Anybody else, if you need anything else from us, give us a call. Look forward to talking to you. And Clint, we'll see you in Orlando.
Absolutely. Later.
Thanks again. Good night, guys.